Welcome to the Purposely Aligned Entrepreneur Podcast presented by Boss Girl Creative. This is episode number 492. Today, I'm talking about how to change your business with this particular exercise. Now let's dive in. Hey, I'm Taylor Bradford, host of the Purposely Aligned Entrepreneur Podcast presented by Boss Girl Creative. I help small business owners turn their purpose into a paycheck, and it starts with visibility. In the online world, visibility equates to sales. So if you're dreaming of being the next $1 million entrepreneur, you've come to the right place because weekly I share visibility tips, brand advice, and business resources. So grab a notebook, your favorite pen, and a beverage, and let's do the work. Hey, welcome to episode 492. I'm your host, Taylor Bradford. I so appreciate you being here, listening to this episode, which is all about an exercise that is going to change your business. Before we get into that, let's find out what's been going on in the land of social media. Social media headline number one, Meta opens a retail pop-up in LA to showcase its smart glasses. Meta's looking to sell more Ray-Bans this Christmas. And side note, we actually have a pair of these things and they're pretty awesome. Social media headline number two, Canadian government orders shutdown of TikTok's local operations. TikTok staff will be forced out of Canada, but the app will remain available in the region. Social media headline number three, Instagram says it does not reduce the reach of sponsored content. This is coming from Instagram chief Adam Mosseri, and he says that this does not happen. Social media headline number four, Pinterest reaches new record high for users in quarter three. A solid performance update from Pinterest. And finally, X experiments with free access to its Grok AI chatbot. All X users may soon be able to try out X's generative AI chatbot. And that wraps up this week's social media headlines. Okay, so before we get into the nuts and bolts of this week's episode, which is all about an exercise that will change your business, and it follows along with what I've been talking about over the last couple of episodes related to building your brand, creating your brand, and what that actually means. So I've been thinking really hard about what is the future for this podcast. And I'm really excited. We got our construction plans back from our architect, and now I feel like we are pedal to the metal, and I'm like, wait, can we slow down just a little bit? And next steps are going to be getting a concrete engineer to kind of stamp our foundation plans to make sure that our concrete subcontractor understands what is needed for the structurability of our building or the foundation to support the structure. And then also getting the plans to our electrician and our plumber and all of that. And I actually just reached out to a friend of mine who I started this blogging journey with a long time ago. I met her through blogging, who is an architect by trade, a designer by trade. And she actually teaches high school students the art of interior design and architecture. And so I reached out to her and I was like, hey, I kind of need some help with the living room, dining room, kitchen area because it's a wide open space because we are building a barn dominium. My sidewalls are 18 feet tall, and in this section of the house, it's all the way up and open to the ceiling. And I would love to see a wood slatted ceiling in there, but we're talking 18 feet to where it starts the ceiling, and then the roof pitch goes from there. And thankfully our roof pitch is only a 412, so it's not a monstrous climb up to the pitch, but it's still a wide open space. And this one wall is going to be just a solid wall. I mean, there's a hallway entrance and exit, and there's a pantry door. And then in the kitchen, you've got the fridge sitting on that wall, and you've got some cabinetry. But outside of those things, it's a wide open wall. And I'm like, I can't, even being a designer myself, I can't see a solution on how to handle this. So I was like, can you help me? And she was like, oh my gosh, it'd be a great project for my students. And I'm like, yes, it would be a great project for your students. So I'm looking forward to seeing what else I need to provide her. I've given access to my Pinterest inspiration. I've given access to my actual drawings. And yeah, so TBD, but I need some help because now we're pedal to the metal and I'm like, I have to have these design decisions made really quickly. Like I need to talk to a cabinet guy and I need to talk to my painter and all of these things. And so it's a little nerve-wracking, but here we are. So all that to say, I have this one space that I have basically created for myself in this house as being my podcast recording space. And it is a 4th bedroom. Like we were able to put a closet in based on just how the roof line is. And anyways, lots of things involved to get it there. But I will have a podcast room. And I feel like this is going to be kind of like my hideaway and my book nook and my podcast recording space and all of these things. And I have a visual for what I want to make that be. But it also had me thinking about the longevity of the podcast. What do I want this podcast to be moving forward? I so want this space. I so want to continue recording, but like what kind of conversations do I need to continue having? And we're encroaching upon my 500th episode, which is in 8 episodes, right? This is episode 492, 8 more episodes. We're at episode 500. Next July, I celebrate 10 years with this podcast. And I would love to see more conversations being had on the podcast. Now, does that mean I'm going to accept guest pitches? No, I'm still not open to that. I plan on pitching people that I actually want to have conversations with on the show in the future. And so I've been noodling on this idea that basically starts with, what are you Googling? Because what I see as a gap in business for women specifically is once you reach a level of success, you start closing in on yourselves because of fear related to a variety of things, whether that is being beaten to the punchline, whether that is, your next viable product, whether that is like what you need to invest in next. Like the conversations that women are not having because they're scared or have fear or have anxiety is ultimately preventing massive leaps and bounds in their businesses because they don't have anyone to talk to them about. Like maybe they've surpassed their friend group in what makes sense to have a conversation around. So they go to their trusty Google and start asking Google the questions that they should be able to ask their friend group or their advisory group or their mentor group. And what I'm seeing in the mastermind that I'm a part of right now that actually is just wrapping up, and now I become an alum of this thing, which is something else I would love to explore with listeners of this show, is having small masterminds that don't cost you an arm and a leg to be a part of, but give you a safe space to ask questions and to talk about what you're Googling, because I can tell you what I'm Googling right now doesn't make sense for a vast majority of the humans that orbit me. And while that is sad to some extent, it's like I see why people don't talk about the things that they're struggling with, especially if you're a business owner, because you don't want to show vulnerability. You don't want to show that things are hard. You don't want to show what hurdles you have. And I'm seeing that in this mastermind. And so I'm like, okay, I would love to have couch conversations once I'm in this space that I can see so clearly in my mind's eye that I'm about to build. I can see these couch conversations, and I don't necessarily mean you actually have to join me in my home to have these conversations. I do think that a lot of them can happen virtually, but it would be really cool to invite people to have these couch conversations. And I go back to the movie that just came out with Kristen Bell and Adam Brody, and her sister in the Netflix series called Nobody Wants This, they actually record their podcast sitting on a couch. And I know this is not revolutionary, and I know this is not an original way to host a podcast, but I think it would be really cool to be able to have these kinds of conversations that are in a more relaxed state because you are sitting on a couch. You're kind of taking away the professional stance of having to sit behind a computer and a microphone and be kind of stuffy and like get to the heart of what you're Googling. And I don't necessarily want to call it What Are You Googling series, but like Couch Confidential, Couch Chronicles, Couch something, I want to make it a series that it's not an every week series. It is maybe a monthly series, maybe a quarterly series where I can have deep conversations about what women in business are Googling. Like that's the opener. What are you Googling? What do you think is missing in your industry? What do you think is missing in your niche? And having those conversations because no one else is having those conversations. I have literally been noodling on this idea for years, and I've made a short list of people I want to pitch. And I've reached out to some of them, and I got yeses initially about, coming on and recording an episode, but I hadn't really fleshed out the idea just yet. But I can tell you that there is hesitation in having these conversations. And like, I have a whole lot of questions about that. I have a whole lot of questions about me personally. Why is it so hard for me to share what I'm Googling? And there's just a lot of fear and anxiety built up around those things where women can't be forthcoming without feeling like they're about to get attacked or like they're feeling like something is about to be stolen from them. And it really sucks that we are here in 2024 with these kinds of mindsets. And so I would love to hear your thoughts. So first of all, I've decided to use SpeakPipe to get your audio feedback, whether it is an aha moment from an episode or you are wanting to chime in to a conversation that I'm having on the podcast, or you're answering something that I'm putting a call out to answer for. I want you to use SpeakPipe so I can hear you. I think this will be a really fun feature for the show moving forward. Speakpipe.com/BossGirlCreative, or simply go to bossgirlcreative.com/speak, and it will take you there. And I want to hear, what are your thoughts around these Couch Chronicles? What are your thoughts about hearing what people are Googling? Because I see the gap. And unless you're willing to invest 6 figures to join a mastermind, you don't have access to people that can help you beyond Google. And that's a shame. That really is a shame that we as a society, especially for women, and I'm pretty sure that men can experience this if their macho-ness can be set aside. I'm pretty sure men can experience this too, but this show is more geared at the female creative or the female business owner. And I want to hear what you think about this idea. So pop over to bossgirlcreative.com/speak to tell me your thoughts, because I'd love to hear them as I continue to noodle on this idea about how to bring this to fruition. And maybe this is a 2-parter. Maybe the conversations go 60 to 90 minutes long and I have to, break them out, which would be totally fine, because I think these are the conversations we need to be hearing that no one is saying or no one is talking about. And it breaks my heart because I've noticed it for the last couple of years, and no one has been willing to rip the Band-Aid off to step into these uncharted waters to have these conversations. Because I can remember when I decided I wanted to have another interview series, I did reach out to my audience and even through my Facebook and said, hey, what kinds of questions would you want to hear people answer? And I got crickets, because even people are scared to answer what they want to hear other people talk about. And I don't want it to be a cliched thing like, tell me about who you are. Yes, that's going to be a question because we want to know some background about the person that I'm talking to. But It's not a sales pitch. There will be no sales pitching. At the very end, they can share who they are and where you can find them. But this is about more meaningful conversations about struggles and wins and like next steps and those kinds of things that aren't being had out loud. And so I am looking forward to exploring this more. And again, I would love to hear what you have to say about this. Again, bossgirlcreative.com/speak. That's going to take you to SpeakPipe where you can record audio to tell me because I want to hear it. Okay, now let's get in to an exercise that is going to change your business. So I have a question for you. Raise your hand if you feel boring. I've got my hand raised as high as I can raise it over here. This is one of the things that I feel that I struggle with the most is relatability, that I am just a boring individual. But the good thing about feeling boring is that we're most likely more grounded in ourselves and our lives than someone who might be egotistical or self-centered. So if you also feel boring, maybe not all the time, but maybe sometimes, or maybe it is all the time, you're in excellent company. I'm curious if you've also ever felt this when scrolling Instagram. How are these people so interesting? Why am I sucked into their content like I am? Why am I going down rabbit holes to explore them further? How are these people so interesting? I literally asked a fashion influencer yesterday on Instagram. She put up a question box and I said, she was asking like, hey, what do you want to see me like put outfits together coming into the future? And I was like, could you create some intentionally cozy athleisure outfits appropriate for public? I legit put that in her question box. No lie, not kidding. Because that's what I wear every single day, athleisure. I wear yoga pants, I wear t-shirts, I wear athletic shorts, I wear sweatshirts all the time. Except when I'm networking and then I'm all like on brand, I'm all done up. But outside of networking and being on brand, I am in athleisure. And I feel boring 99% of the time. Okay, really all the time. I feel boring. I feel like, what the heck can I share that is relatable? But here's the thing. What I also believe and have been trying harder to implement is the power of stories and using our stories in a way that is impactful. Because telling stories creates connection. And if you've been listening over the last few weeks, you know that's a direct correlation to building community. So we're going to do an exercise that will transform your brand, your business, and make you unboring. Or maybe boost your confidence enough to believe you aren't boring. So when you do have one of those boring-filled days, when you don't feel like you have anything to share or nothing to say, this exercise will help you. I can tell you I am one of the most basic humans you will ever meet. I'm pretty simple in my day-to-day. I really do wear athleisure every single day. Let's face it, when you move furniture for a living, you don't wear jeans or boots or high heels very often. And I love the feeling of cozy. I love to feel comfortable. To me, those things feel basic, especially when I start scrolling Instagram. But we are all walking, living, breathing stories, just like the people we see in our Instagram feeds. And even though you might feel uninteresting, there are pieces of your journey that will connect you to others. And when you can craft by refining what those stories are, you can become a pro at sharing your stories in a purposeful way, which can have the impact of turning people from passerbys into fans or friends and can turn followers into paying clients. You are the most unique part of your brand, which is what I've been saying over and over and over in the last few episodes, but also in the archives of this podcast. When was the last time you sat down to write out your story or even parts of your story? Have you ever done this? You might, in a way, if you like to journal or if you have journaled in the past, that's writing down your story. But we would need to refine those journal entries in a way to create connection, because usually those are just brain dumps. When you hear someone share part of their story and you find yourself saying to yourself, "Me too," or "Oh, feel that," you've just connected to that person. Their story sharing made a connection point for you. That's the difference maker, getting your ideal client to say, "Me too," or "feel that." These connection points also help you remove yourself from pricing conversations, which I have mentioned in the past. So can you see how powerful stories are? It's time to intentionally craft recognizable brand stories for yourself. If you were to publish a post today without a watermark, a logo, your Instagram handle, would people recognize it was coming from you? Would your words be spottable? If you're feeling like these cues have no answers, then let's dive in. Here's where you need to get out a piece of paper and a pen or your notes app, because the questions are about to start flowing. Number 1, what am I most passionate about in life? If you had an entirely free day with zero limits, what would excite you to do? And that most surely has a story behind it. One of the best ways to start curating your story narrative is by digging deep into your life archives to find stories that help tell more about you, about why you love it. So start thinking about that question. What are you the most passionate about in this life? What fires you up? What do you enjoy studying? What do you enjoy learning about? What articles do you open up when you see them out on social media? What is exciting to you? Right now, for me, it's gardening and homesteading. Like, that is what is full up in my Instagram feed and in my Instagram stories, and the people that I have started to follow and am now finding more of is all about gardening and homesteading. So my past gardening experience starts when I was a little kid and we grew cucumbers. And I can remember I let this one cucumber get so incredibly big. I wanted to see how big I could get the cucumber. Was it tasty? No, because it went beyond the limits of an actual tasty cucumber. But it was fascinating to me to learn how things grew from the ground in Mother Nature. And growing up, I had a grandfather that was an avid vegetable gardener. He had beautiful gardens as well, as did my dad's mom. She had beautiful gardens. But my mom's dad loved to garden. He had massive gardens. And I can remember as a kid going out and picking fresh vegetables off the plants. There's nothing better than a vine-ripened tomato. And I can remember holding purple whole peas and snapping green beans. And I can remember all of these things of how curious I was as a kid to learn about these things. And then, fast forward, I realized that my parents kind of skipped those things. And now here I am back in the trenches of learning all about how to be a good steward of my land and how to grow a garden. And let me tell you, it's one gigantic experiment for sure. But I feel so passionate about knowing where my food is coming from. So when I talk about these things, it can help paint a picture of who I was as a kid and who I am now when I talk about my love of gardening. So do you see how by looking at it, what you're passionate about, all of these things, these stories, they can create connection points for people? Question number 2. Think of a transformation that you have experienced in life. If you feel like you can't recall the last time you morphed into something new, I get it, but I promise you, you have a before and after somewhere. People love to hear how you started in some place and then transformed into something else, whether that's a new location, a new position, a new mindset. Who doesn't enjoy seeing a good before and after? And then learning about the actual transformation. It's one of the most effective and compelling ways to market something. A transformation as to how you got to where you are is extremely compelling and creates mega connection points for people. The important components of a transformation include sharing the struggle, the before and the after, the visual side of things, and then what you learned in the process. For example, you've heard me talk about reading Smart Couples Finish Rich. I was fresh out of college. I didn't have a job. It took me a while to find a job where somebody would actually say, yes, I will hire you for that thing. And in the middle of the night, basically, we had to leave where we were living and move up to a rented room because we ran out of money. We were broke as a joke and literally had to pawn something to pay for the first month's rent. Had no money. But we decided that was not going to define us. So we read Smart Couples Finish Rich. We wrote down our 5-year goals. I can pull that book out of my bookshelf right now and see those goals that we wrote down in 2003 and see that we hit every single one of them. That was a transformative place for me and my husband. Smart Couples Finish Rich. We did the work, we transformed ourselves, and now we are in a place where we don't have worries anymore. We have built an empire for ourselves, and it started with that book, Smart Couples Finish Rich. Transformations happen in our lives all of the time. Another example is if you've ever gone through a period of grief. I lost my mom when I was 24 years old. I'm currently 43. It has been 19 years since I lost my mom. I lost my brother when I was 30. It has been 13 years since I lost my brother. And losing both of them, my mom had non-smoker's lung cancer. And I felt at the time as a 24-year-old that we just had a really crappy relationship leading up to when she found out she had cancer. And I did try during her cancer fight to reconnect with my mom on a level. But what I feel like I miss out on the most with having lost her so young is getting to learn who she was as an adult, like me being an adult as she being an adult. And I feel like kind of what has propelled me into having Sugar Creek is what I saw her do as a kid. Like, she loved antiques so much. She had antique stores or antique booths in antique malls. And I basically rent vintage furniture for a living. Like, how parallel is that story? And losing my brother to an accidental overdose to Xanax. I mean, I can remember where I was when I got the phone call from my dad. My brother was 26 years old. I had just celebrated my 30th birthday. We had had a conversation a week after my birthday about where he was going in his own life, that he wanted to send me a birthday gift. And I was like, no, that's not necessary. And just a week later, he was gone. But we didn't discover him for 12 days. For 12 days, my brother had passed and nobody knew. Those moments, it took me forever to work through the grief of losing my mom and then losing my brother. And because being in Texas and I'm from Arkansas, all of that was out of sight, out of mind for me. And I can tell you, when you shove down grief, it will find its way to the surface. It will find its way whether you're wanting it to or not, and you will have to deal with it. But I know what it's like to have loss, and it sucks. It sucks. I miss my mom every single day. I miss having conversations with my brother. Even though we fought like cats and dogs growing up, we had no relationship as kids. We were stark opposites of each other. If you can get really intentional at crafting the narrative of transformation, you can show people at all different walks of the journey how you overcame and what was on the other side for you. There is nothing more inspiring than owning your transformation and figuring out how to clearly communicate it in a way that resonates. So now that you have these 2 questions to think about, I want you to think of 3 to 5 stories that have potential to connect you with your dream clients. Think about how you can connect beyond what you do. This will give people a reason to follow you and trust you, even if they don't need what you're selling. I don't want you to hide behind your work. Think about stories from your childhood that have helped shape you into who you are. Think about stories that help share more about what makes you you. Write these stories down as succinctly as possible. Detail-rich, fun, simple. Take out all of the fluff. What stories do you find yourself telling most often? If I were to see you at a coffee shop, what story would you be excited to tell me? Don't make it hard. These stories are really obvious to you already. They are things that people ask you about all the time. They are things we like to share and talk about because we love them so much. So write them down. Remove the fluff. Remove any unnecessary elements. Get clear on the message behind the story and get clear on the purpose in terms of connection. When you look at where you can start to infuse these stories, you're going to realize how easy it will become and how recognizable you will be to people who read them, which creates connection beyond your work. These will be stories that you learn, that you practice, and that you tell often. These will be stories that you will share at networking events, on your website, in your Instagram captions, in your email newsletters. Weave these stories through because when you can confidently share these stories over and over, it will create connection points for people. So when you go to write your next piece of content, cut the fluff, remove the adjectives, and listen. Is it a strong story? Does it make sense? Are we seeing the main character? Do we see a struggle? Do we see transformation? Are we celebrating a victory? So once you have your stories written down and you've got them ironed out, you're going to know what to say and how to say it and when to share it so that you can create connections, so that people that don't even need your product or service today have a reason to follow. Because you become a likable character in their life through the stories you're telling. There is so much power in stories. And I want you to recognize that. I want you to embrace the fact that you are not boring. I have to tell myself this all the time. Taylor, you are not boring. That you are interesting and that your stories deserve to be told. So start looking at your social media as a place where you are writing your legacy stories, where you can share stories in a way that create connection, that create community, that create a place for ideal clients to find you. And honestly, I cannot wait to hear your stories. Make sure you tag me in them when you share them so that I can connect with you in an even bigger way. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. And until next time, I hope you have a great rest of your week. Hey, real quick before I go, I wanted to pop back in and say again, thank you so much for listening to this latest episode of the Purposely Aligned Entrepreneur Podcast. I would so love a favor from you right now. Would you please share this episode with a friend or share it to your social media and tag me at Boss Girl Creative? Oh my gosh, that would mean so much to me if you did that right now. Okay, I'll see you next week with a brand new episode.